This is the multi-voice text-to-speech podfic reading of Hands by MsAlexWP, composed by Burning Aurora and Caliana. Listen, Remus understands the human body. He understands that it sometimes cannot differentiate between sexual and non-sexual touches, when those touches are what he's doing to the man lying on his massage table right now, i.e., kneading his inner thighs with his hands wrapped around his legs and his thumbs pushing into the firm muscle and tendons just under the groin and on top of his ass. He understands that some people enjoy a little bit of pain with their pleasure, and that even a monk couldn't control where the blood flows if that pleasure hits just right. He's seen and heard it all. Erections tenting the massage sheet, spots of wetness on the mattress, agitated squirming under his fingers, and even the occasional moan. But he's never wanted to help a client find relief from those feelings until today. He's also never experienced those feelings himself while giving a massage until today. That's because he's never had Sirius Black on his table until today. Remus knew that Black was trouble when he walked in. He looked like dark sin, a strutting wet dream with silky black hair that fell to his shoulders and a couple days' worth of scruff darkening his face and chin. He was tall and leanly muscled, wearing ripped black jeans, shit-kicking black boots, and a plain, tight white t-shirt that showed inky black tattoos that disappeared up his sleeves and down his collar. His lips were full and plush, his eyes a flashing quicksilver gray, and he moved with a sinewy grace, like a dangerous python. He approached the front desk of Silver Moon Massage and leaned across it, his taut forearms flexing.
Sirius Black, I have a 1 o'clock massage appointment,
he said in a low voice. He glanced over at Remus.
Deep tissue.
Remus caught his eye and felt heat pool in his stomach, but quickly looked away, forcing himself to stare at only his computer screen instead. He didn't have another client until 4 o'clock and was using the downtime to catch up on ordering some inventory. Oils, lotions, candles, aromatherapy sticks, towels, sheets, smooth stones, hot wax. How, after 9 years in business, had it never occurred to him how much their everyday work supplies screamed sex? His business partner, Lily, greeted Black and typed away on the other computer looking for his appointment.
Welcome,
she said.
I have a few forms for you to fill out since you've never been here before. You'll be with Marlene today.
Actually,
Black said, looking at Remus.
Can I have him?
Remus's head snapped up and felt the python tightening around his chest, claiming its prey as Black watched him. Black's eyes were like fire on his skin, the hint of a smile playing on his lips, showing his teeth.
I think I'd feel more comfortable with a man,
Black added casually, looking back at Lily. It wasn't unusual. Women often requested female massage therapists too, but Remus had a feeling that wasn't what was happening here. Lily said, glancing sideways at her friend.
I don't know if he's available.
She gave Remus a wide-eyed, questioning look. Remus swallowed and took a deep breath, working hard to train his face into an impassive veneer of professionalism. He looked back at Black and spoke in a strong, clear voice.
No, it's okay.
He said, looking directly into Black's eyes.
I'm available.
Black looked back at him, and the hint of a smile widened. He pulled his lower lip between his teeth for a second before releasing it, reddened and swollen.
Good,
he said airily, raising an eyebrow. He took the clipboard with the new client paperwork and a pen from Lily without taking his eyes off Remus. He pulled the pen cap off with his teeth and sat down in a chair next to the desk, his legs splayed wide, and gave Remus another look before starting to write. Remus watched him with his mouth hanging open a little. Lily looked between the two men for another second, then grabbed Remus by the elbow and pulled him into the back room.
Remus,
she hissed.
We are the top-rated massage studio in the city.
I know.
And we have been for 7 years. If you fuck that up by fucking him, I will kill you.
What?
Remus exclaimed a little too vehemently.
What the hell are you talking about?
Oh, please, I've seen that look on your face before. I know what it leads to.
Yeah, in a bar, Lily, not at work. Jesus Christ.
She didn't reply, only narrowed her eyes as though she didn't believe him.
Don't look at me like that,
Remus whispered.
Nothing will happen. I've had hot guys on my massage table before who've grabbed my ass and propositioned me. So have you. Have you ever acted on it?
No.
No, you haven't,
Remus said.
Even when James came in here for 3 months straight, and you had to be alone with yourself in the sauna for 15 minutes after he left every time.
Lily was silent at the reminder that her brand new boyfriend started out as a massage client.
Fine.
She sighed, and Remus was happy to hear the sheepishness in her voice.
And
And I'm sorry.
She added,
thank you.
he said, trying to sound dignified, but that resolve drained out of him as soon as he walked back into the lobby. Black was back at the counter, the clipboard hanging casually by his side, and the pen tucked behind his ear. He gave Remus another heat-filled look and handed him the clipboard, letting their fingers brush together and sending a small shiver across Remus's skin.
You can come with me, Mr. Black.
Remus said, gesturing for Black to follow him down a short hallway where soft, zen-like music was playing through the hidden speakers in the wall. He and Lily tried to make everything about the space calming, from the music to the lighting to the clean lavender fragrance in the air.
You can call me Sirius.
He replied, pushing his hands into the back pockets of his jeans and tilting his head a little at Remus.
Okay, Sirius, I'm Remus. Do you need the bathroom before we start?
No, I did everything necessary before I came.
Remus said, annoyed with himself when his voice cracked a little as he spoke. He led them into a dimly lit massage room, keeping a white-knuckled grip on the doorknob as he stepped aside to let Sirius in.
You can get undressed completely, or you can leave your underwear on if you're more comfortable with that. Then get on the table underneath the sheet. Start face down.
Funny, I usually end up face down.
Sirius said with a little laugh.
I'll come back in a few minutes.
Remus said, choosing to ignore that last comment even as his cock twitched eagerly. Traitor, he admonished his misbehaving dick. He stepped into the hallway, shut the door, and leaned his forehead against the cool wall. Good Lord, this was going to be a hard hour. He was already flustered and hadn't even seen Sirius without his clothes on or touched him yet. He took a few deep, steadying breaths, willed himself to calm the fuck down, then knocked on the door.
Come in.
He heard Sirius say. Remus opened the door and walked inside. Sirius was lying face down on the table, and Remus's breath faltered. Sirius had pulled his hair into a loose bun on top of his head, exposing the back of his pale neck and a tattoo that inked up the lean tendons. Remus approached the table and folded the sheet down to Sirius's lower back, revealing the tight muscles that curved across his body and ended in two dimples right above his hips. He was completely naked, and his ass swelled magnificently underneath the folded sheet. Fuck, he was gorgeous. Remus had massaged hundreds of people over the course of 9 years on this very table. Professional athletes, bodybuilders, Instagram influencers, models, and he had never ever seen anyone with the raw sexual power of Sirius Black. It rippled off him, like heat waves on burning sand. Remus's knees shook as he positioned himself at the top of the table in front of Sirius's head, slicked up his hands with massage oil, and placed them flat on his shoulder blades. God damn, he felt good, Remus thought, as he leaned forward, folding his body over Sirius's and pushing his hands down the hard, ropey muscles with a single, long, firm stroke until they reached the spot just above Sirius's ass. He pushed his thumbs into his lower back and moved them in strong, deep circles for a minute before going back up to his shoulders and doing it again.
Just tell me if the pressure is too much.
Remus said in a voice that shook a little as he started working his thumbs into Sirius's shoulder blades. Sirius had asked for a deep tissue massage, which was more intense than a lot of people realized.
It's perfect.
Sirius breathed.
I like it hard.
Good.
Remus croaked, continuing to press into the firm, knotty muscle even as he felt the blood rush toward his groin. God, how he wanted to slide his slick hands under the sheet, grip Sirius's firm ass, spread him wide, and... Remus shook his head a little and brought himself back to what he was doing. He looked at the clock on the wall. It had been 5 minutes. He still had 55 to go. He's a client, Remus tried to tell himself, and besides, he probably flirts like that with everyone. Such was the prerogative of beautiful people. He tried to push Sirius's words about liking it hard out of his mind. Remus had given so many massages that he knew their choreography by heart, so he decided to just take deep breaths and try to think about other things, whether they needed to order more cleaning supplies, whether Lily had remembered to call the plumber about the leaking pipe in the basement, whether Sirius's skin would feel as good under his lips and tongue as it did under his fingers. Fuck. Remus took a step back and closed his eyes for a moment. This was getting ridiculous. He'd massaged attractive people before. He could do this, he told himself. He took deep, slow breaths, in through his nose and out through his mouth, until he felt his heart rate drop enough to continue. He moved through the motions with firm and deliberate pressure. His hands curled around Sirius's neck and stroked the tight tendons until they loosened under his fingers. His elbows slid down either side of his spine in long, slippery glides. His hands squeezed his biceps and forearms with hard thrusts. His thumbs rolled into his wrists and palms, and their fingers laced together and pulled. Soon, he was almost halfway through the hour. His dick was semi-hard, but he'd managed to stave off full arousal by continually digging his heel into his own foot and repeating his silent mantra, "I can do this." But when Remus moved toward the lower half of Sirius's body, his resolve began to strain. He wrapped both of his large hands around Sirius's thick thighs and ran them upward, digging his thumbs into the hamstrings and up his glutes so hard that Sirius drew in a sharp breath.
Too much?
Remus asked.
No,
Sirius said in a strained voice.
it's perfect.
Against his will, Remus felt his cock fatten and strain against his zipper as Sirius's deep voice rumbled through him, and his hands continued to roam up and down Sirius's legs. He might have to excuse himself to tuck his erection up under his waistband soon, or Sirius would be getting an eyeful when Remus asked him to roll over in a few minutes. Finally, Remus's fingers reached the firm flesh of Sirius's ass. It felt incredible under his palms, as though it was made especially for Remus to grab onto. His breath was starting to come in ragged gasps, and he squirmed in his now uncomfortably tight pants. He squeezed and massaged Sirius's ass and willed himself to stay quiet, begged his fingers to stop shaking, prayed that he could get through the next 30 minutes without embarrassing himself, when he heard a small sound coming from the top of the massage table. Remus's hands stilled. Was Sirius whining? Maybe it was Remus's imagination, or maybe it was just wishful thinking. Remus repeated the motion, running his hands up Sirius's thigh and onto his ass with a hard, insistent force, and thought he heard something again, a tortured little noise coming from the back of Sirius's throat. Remus pushed upward on the other leg, his fingers wrapped around Sirius's thigh and curving around his ass, and this time there was no mistaking it. Sirius sighed clearly and audibly and squirmed a little under Remus's hands. Remus looked up and saw that he was breathing heavily, his back rising and falling hard under the sheet. Remus walked slowly up the side of the table but stopped before reaching Sirius's head. Remus's erection was now insistent and clearly visible, and he wanted to keep it hidden as much as he could.
You can, roll onto your back now.
Remus said.
I think I need a minute.
Sirius said breathlessly.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Remus said, his heart racing.
It's an intimate touch.
Yeah,
Sirius said. Sirius rolled onto his side, looked down the table to where Remus was standing, and their eyes met.
does this happen a lot?
He asked quietly. Sirius was at eye level with Remus's crotch, and his eyes flicked downward to the obvious bulge there. Remus took a shaking breath and considered the question. Yes, it happened fairly often to clients. No, it had never happened to him. He decided on a vague answer that was somewhere the middle.
Sometimes.
I can see why.
Sirius said in a low voice, dragging his eyes back up to Remus's face. Fuck, he wanted to pounce on him right now.
Would you excuse me for a minute?
Remus asked in a strangled voice and started to walk toward the door. He needed to readjust himself and maybe splash some water on his face or get Lily to slap him. But Sirius stopped him.
No, wait.
Sirius said, sitting up and letting the sheet fall around his waist. Remus took a sharp breath at the sight of his tattooed chest and lean stomach.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable.
You didn't.
Remus said quickly.
But if you're uncomfortable with me, I can get you someone else to finish the service, and we won't charge you either.
No,
Sirius said in a low voice, his eyes never leaving Remus's.
I want you.
Remus nodded, his heart pounding so hard he was sure Sirius could hear it.
Okay.
Will you come back and finish me?
Yeah, of course.
Remus said. Sirius laid down on the table again, this time on his back, and he closed his eyes. Remus pulled the sheet up and smoothed it over his chest before massaging one arm, then another, then the top of his chest and around his collarbones, trying to keep his eyes off of Sirius and instead keeping them trained on a small scuff on the baseboard near the door. But when he moved to the top of the table behind Sirius's head to massage his neck and scalp, he couldn't help but look down into his face. He was so beautiful, with his black eyelashes fanned out over sharp cheekbones and his pink, pillowy lips looking extravagantly kissable. Remus placed one shaking hand behind Sirius's neck, slid it upwards to the back of his head, and lifted it slightly off the table. His thumb stroked over the tender skin where Sirius's neck and shoulder met, and he couldn't help but think about how nice that spot would feel between his teeth, how pretty it would look all mottled and bruised. He gently pulled the elastic from Sirius's hair and let the silky black locks flow freely around his fingers, then slowly pressed his fingertips into Sirius's scalp and rubbed, letting his fingernails graze the skin slightly. Then he threaded his fingers through Sirius's hair and closed his hand into a loose fist, pulling the hair slightly as he did. Sirius's lips fell open, and a little gasp escaped them. Remus moved his hands a little and pulled again, and Sirius's eyebrows furrowed above his still-shut eyes. Remus did it again, and Sirius's tongue flicked out of his mouth, wetting his lips. Remus quickly took a step back, trying to covertly calm his dick, when he lifted his eyes and felt his stomach twist with want. The sheet was tented upward between Sirius's legs over what was clearly a huge, stiff cock. Remus looked back down at Sirius's face to see that his eyes were now open, and his gaze was heavy.
I'm sorry.
Sirius said quietly.
It's just your hands, and your voice, and your face, and your body. They're all
He wet his lips again.
a lot.
Remus didn't answer him, just stood there with his chest heaving and his dick fighting to get out.
I want you, Remus.
Sirius said in a strangled voice, finally saying the thing out loud, the thing that both of their bodies already knew. They stared at each other, and the air felt electric between them, like one tiny spark would set the whole room on fire.
But if you want me to leave, I will.
Remus couldn't believe what he was about to do. Lily would kill him. But he did it anyway. He walked slowly to the door and locked it with a little press of his thumb. Sirius watched him do it, dropped his eyes down to Remus's hand and heard the little click of metal in the quiet room. When his eyes met Sirius's again, Remus saw a wicked gleam in them and the ghost of a smile playing on his lips.
This isn't that kind of place,
Remus said warningly.
just so you know.
I know.
Sirius said,
And I've never done anything like this before,
I figured.
and it will never ever happen again.
Okay.
and then Remus crossed the room in 2 long strides, and Sirius sat up, and within seconds they'd crashed into each other, their lips hungry and impatient. Remus found the back of Sirius's neck with one hand and the sharp ridge of his jaw with the other, and pulled him closer as Sirius's fingers scrabbled to frantically work open the button and zipper on Remus's pants. He plunged his hand inside, closed it around Remus's rock-hard cock, tipped his head back, and groaned appreciatively.
I could tell by your hands how big you were.
Sirius panted, pumping him steadily while his other hand slid over Remus's ass. Remus tilted down and captured Sirius's lips in another wet and messy kiss as Sirius stroked his shaft, sliding his thumb over the head and the slit and slicking it with pre-cum. They gasped into each other's mouths as their teeth clacked and tongues licked messily. Then Remus's teeth closed around Sirius's lower lip, and Sirius released a deep moan into Remus's mouth. Remus stilled a little, considering the past 45 minutes and all the times Sirius squirmed and gasped under his touch. When his thumbs dug hard into his ass cheeks, when his fists pulled his hair, and now as he bit his lip. And of course he couldn't forget Sirius's words.
I like it hard.
The sheet was still tangled around Sirius's waist as Remus reached around and slid his hands downward, pressing his fingers into the flesh of Sirius's ass and pulling him forward so their hips were flushed together. Remus dipped his head down into the curve of Sirius's shoulder and worked the tender skin into a sucking, biting kiss. Sirius gasped at the sharp pain and his back arched into it as he writhed beneath Remus's lips, just like Remus knew he would. Remus bit a satisfied smile harder into Sirius's skin.
Holy shit.
Sirius gasped, and his hand on Remus's cock tightened and stilled, as Remus sucked a dark bruise into his neck. Finally, Sirius withdrew his hand from Remus's pants, found the bottom of Remus's shirt and yanked it up over his head, then pushed his pants and boxers down around his knees, letting Remus's thick cock finally fall free.
Fuck, oh my god.
Sirius muttered, reaching for Remus's cock again as Remus quickly kicked off his shoes and stepped out of his pants.
I want you in my mouth right now.
Sirius said desperately. He laid down on his stomach and put his hands on Remus's narrow hips to direct him to the top of the massage table again. They were in the same positions as when they started, except this time Remus was naked too, and he finally had a clear view of Sirius's perfect ass, which he leaned forward and grabbed eagerly with his still slippery hands, like he'd been longing to do for the past hour, and pressed hot kisses all along Sirius's neck and shoulders and back. As his body curved over Sirius, he felt tight, wet heat close around his cock. Sirius licked and sucked as he reached both arms forward, pumping his shaft with one hand and massaging Remus's ass with the other. Remus stood up again and braced himself with one hand at the edge of the massage table as Sirius worked him. He put his fingers back into Sirius's silky black hair and pulled, this time harder than he had during the massage, and Sirius hummed gratefully around his cock, which was now hitting the back of Sirius's slick, hot throat. After only about a minute or two, Remus felt himself about to come and pulled away from Sirius's mouth. He wasn't ready to be finished with this yet. Instead, he dropped to his knees so he could kiss Sirius again, which was just as good as anything else they'd done so far, before walking around to the far end of the massage table, where he grabbed Sirius's ankles and pulled, sliding him down the table until his ass was close enough for Remus to palm again, and eliciting a delighted little moan from Sirius. Remus massaged Sirius's ass cheeks roughly, slid his thumbs into the cleft, and spread him wide, longing to plunge himself inside, before remembering that Sirius's own cock had been neglected for the past hour.
Roll over.
Remus commanded, and Sirius obeyed immediately. Sirius's dick stood straight up and was so hard that the skin around the head was shiny, purplish red, and desperate to be touched. Remus hooked his hands underneath Sirius's knees and opened them wide so he could easily access Sirius's cock. He licked a weeping stream of pre-cum before taking him into his mouth. Sirius's hips bucked upwards as Remus swallowed him down and held his thighs firmly in his hands. He sucked and licked, tightening his lips around the shaft as he pushed Sirius's cock deeper down his throat. Sirius's thighs tightened and tensed in Remus's palms as he approached the edge, and just as he got there, Remus pulled off, pushed Sirius's ass into the air, and licked from his perineum up his balls, swirling his tongue up and down and around the sensitive area until Sirius cried out.
Remus,
He cried.
I need you to fuck me, please.
I don't have any.
Remus started.
I do. My jeans pocket, on the chair.
Do you just travel with a condom and lube?
Remus marveled as he reached into the pocket.
You don't.
Sirius asked, propping himself up on his forearms while his legs dangled off the end of the massage table. Remus laughed, stood between Sirius's legs, and kissed him again, and this time felt something a little different in it. He pulled away and looked into Sirius's quicksilver eyes, letting his thumbs stroke across his throat for a moment before kissing him again. Sirius hummed against his lips and ran his hands down Remus's back, curling his fingers a little into the muscle and nibbling on Remus's lips.
Play back.
Remus said, and Sirius did, letting Remus press one, then two lubed-up fingers into him and pumping them in and out as Sirius groaned eagerly, stroking himself with his own lubed hand.
I don't need a lot of prep.
Sirius said breathlessly.
I'm ready.
Are you sure?
Remus asked.
Positive.
He replied.
I want that gorgeous cock of yours to stretch me out.
Sirius's words went straight to Remus's dick, which somehow swelled even harder, and it was all Remus could do to roll the condom over himself and lube it up before lifting Sirius's thighs and sliding straight into him in one strong, fluid motion. He felt so fucking tight that Remus had to stop when he bottomed out so he wouldn't come right then.
God, you feel good.
Remus breathed, kneading Sirius's legs as he pushed them upward.
Don't be gentle.
Sirius said, still pumping his own cock, and Remus wasn't. He lifted Sirius's thighs and pounded into him with hard, slamming thrusts, angling himself just right so...
Oh God, right there, right there.
Sirius yelled, gripping the bunched-up sheet in his fists.
Don't stop, holy fuck!
Sirius didn't need to worry that Remus would stop. He pounded into him relentlessly, with Sirius keeping up a steady stream of begging and cursing until he was crying out, arching back, and spilling thick, sticky cum over his fist and onto his stomach. Seeing Sirius's orgasm was all it took for Remus to follow too, and he pulsed hard through his finish, so hard that spots clouded his vision, and he thought his knees might give out a little. Remus thrust deeply again, burying his cock one more time and staying there while Sirius laid, blissed out and gasping, on his back. Remus finally pulled out and yanked off the condom, but hesitated before dropping it into the trash can. He was at work, so he wrapped it in a few paper towels first, then got a couple of warm washcloths for them. Sirius reached out for one of them, but Remus had already started cleaning his stomach for him, a gesture that made Sirius stop short in surprise. His eyes softened, and he leaned forward to kiss Remus again, deep and slow. He wrapped his hands around his back and pulled him closer.
You're so fucking gorgeous.
Sirius said against his lips.
I knew I needed you the second I saw you last week.
Last week.
Remus said, pulling back and looking at him, confused.
But we just met today.
For the first time, Sirius's lusty cockiness fell away.
I drove my best friend to his massage appointment last week.
Sirius said.
And when I came back to pick him up, you walked outside with him. He said I should go back and introduce myself, because his new girlfriend always talks about what a great guy you are. But I was too nervous, so I made an appointment instead.
Sirius,
Remus said.
is your best friend James?
The one and only.
Sirius nodded.
He's been raving about Silver Moon massage for months. Now I can see why.
Oh my God.
Remus laughed, leaning his head onto Sirius's shoulder.
Please don't give us a terrible Yelp review.
Are you kidding? That was some 5-star fucking Remus.
Sirius said. He hesitated before speaking again, more quietly this time.
I know you said this would never ever happen again, but I hope you'll rethink that. I'd really like to see you again. Maybe for dinner too next time.
What, half a massage and a fuck wasn't enough for you?
Remus asked, and Sirius smiled, pushed the sweaty hair out of Remus's eyes, and kissed him again.
I have a feeling,
Sirius said,
that when it comes to you, nothing will ever be enough for me.
Finite. Thanks for listening to this text-to-speech podfic composed by Burning Aurora and Caliana.